I am so excited to introduce a new series on Vet Life Reimagined, created in partnership with AVTE, the Association of Veterinary Technician Educators, and their One Community initiative. One Community is built on the belief that none of us succeed alone, that leadership, innovation, and mentorship are not just individual qualities, but collective commitments. It is a call to collaboration and engagement, to building relationships beyond professional interactions, and to creating a network that supports mentors and inspires. Every guest in this series will embody those values, and our first guest is a perfect example of all three. Dr. Mehdi Mobini has been a veterinarian for nearly 50 years, trained in Iran, educated further at Auburn University during one of the most difficult moments in Iranian American history, and shaped by a lifelong philosophy rooted in an ancient Persian tradition: good thoughts, good words, good deeds. His career spans large animal medicine and surgery, small ruminant specialty work in sheep and goats, a field he helped pioneer in the Southeast United States, veterinary technician program development at Fort Valley State University, extension veterinary work across Georgia, and 6 years on the AVMA Board, where he served as one of the most consistent advocates for the veterinary technician profession. He has done mission work in Bangladesh, Jordan, Afghanistan. He helped validate the FAMACHA card, a simple, elegant tool now widely used across the U.S. and other countries to manage parasites in small ruminants. He has mentored students who wanted to drop out and watch them become superstars. And he has done all of it with the quiet conviction that it takes a village to raise a professional. In this conversation, we talk about his remarkable journey, the state of veterinary technician education and utilization, what it really takes to lead at the national level, and what he believes, with 50 years of evidence behind him, about what mentorship can do. Let's get to the conversation with Dr. Mehdi Mobini. When did you know that you first wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
Well, I'm originally from Iran, so I didn't grow up here in the US, and I immigrated later on in life. I know I liked animals because we had cats. We had uh, birds in the house, and we would play with the hens and roosters and all kind of animals, sheep sometimes. And during the summer month, I would go to my uncle who had a farm, and he was raising dairy cows. So I was around the farm, and the way going to the university worked is that you had to take a national exam after your diploma, and then you choose groups that you want to go into. So I was interested in medical groups. So you kind of choose your area of interest, and I was matched with veterinary medicine. Now, I had an opportunity to change later on, but that was my interest, and I continued in veterinary medicine. And of course, large animal, that was where my interest was.
Yeah. Do you remember back when you had the opportunity to change? What was it that kept you there? Was there something specific?
It was either dentistry, that was the choices I was given, and staying in veterinary medicine. And I wanted to concentrate on the whole animal versus the person of the medicine. So I chose veterinary medicine.
Yeah. Now, what is the training like in Iran? Do you have to pick certain tracks? Do you do all species through vet school? What is vet school like?
When I was going to vet school, the one I went to, of course, after 49 years, things changes. But the one I was going to, it was a new veterinary school in a south of the country, in a city called Shiraz, which has a very ancient history in the Iranian civilization. Persepolis is probably most famous historic figure in that city. So the university was called Pahlavi University, was named after the late Shah of Iran, and was an English-speaking university. So all lectures in all majors was in English. And University of Pennsylvania helped to open that vet school. So we were the third class in the vet school. Our books were all English, the same books it was studied in the United States. So, but it was primarily large animal. We had few small animal concept surgery and not much of a medicine, but large animal, it was very exclusive on cattle, horses, sheep, and goat. Food production and food security. Of course, when I was born and going to university that years was so important, and it's still important. But then it shifted now with the society who have pets and like pets, and so a lot of small animal education are needed now together with production animal medicine. But how much of a small animal is taught can say it's a lot, but it's an area of a emphasis and need in the country.
Understood. So, with your training, did you feel comfortable with all animals? What were your thoughts transitioning from vet school into a practice?
I was very comfortable with large animal portion, and that's what it caught my interest, and my subsequent increasing my expertise and learning processes was large animals. So I came to the United States. I went to Auburn and did a master residency in large animal medicine and surgery. So I stayed on large animal focus. I got my hand wet a little bit in a small animal when I was in a school, but not as much as I wanted to just continue, and I didn't feel comfortable.
So, I went to Auburn for vet school, so I do feel like it is a wonderful school. But landing in Alabama, of all places, coming to the United States is probably a little bit of a culture shock. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that whole process, about deciding to come to the US? How did you find Auburn? What was your experience adapting to a very different culture?
The university, when I was going in Iran, it was a new school, didn't have that many local expertise faculty. A few that went to United States and England and got trained and was teaching us, but majority of our professors were coming from overseas on a short-term basis. So we had professors from Auburn, and we had professors from Pennsylvania. We had professors from England, Scotland, Arabic countries, India, Pakistan. And so a diverse group of professors. But when it got to deciding to come for education, of course, the U.S. was on top of all the institutions. Everybody wanted to go. And in my particular case, we had a professor from Auburn, Dr. Peter Soley. He was a physiology of pharmacology teaching us. And so my point of contact, of course, was him as a mentor to tell me how to pursue getting an admission. And he helped a lot. So he was the influencer that made the path for me and another friend I had. Actually, were two of us that we came to Auburn. I want to address the culture issue. Of course, yeah, it was a new culture, a new shock. But in my particular situation, I don't know how much you remember the history. And in 1979, when I came to the U.S., there was also a hostage crisis that Americans were taken hostage in Iran. So, and that took about a year, and every day on the news, it was a program reminding and program on hostages and the situation. So it was, as you can see, an Iranian at that time. It was a little difficult. So we couldn't have much visibility, say, where we were from because of that situation, and it got me in a little bit of challenges going through school. And that's where I had another mentor came to the rescue, and that was Dean Tom Vaughn. He helped me to get a job and continue, because after 3 months, we couldn't get any money from our home country. So it was like, you're on your own. So I'm indebted not only to Auburn for my education, but also to Dean Vaughn for his mentorship and help.
I think a building is named after him, isn't it?
Yes, they Large Animal Hospital is named after a great man. He's done a lot for the profession.
Yeah. Do you have any fun stories from him that you remember?
Uh, his firm handshake. He had a he had a very strong, firm handshake, and that everybody remembers of Dean Vaughn, and his kindness and soft spoken.
Mhm. So you had experience in large animal, and I will say Auburn had an amazing large animal department. How did you start to specialize in sheep and goats? What was that path?
Well, when we went to school in Iran, of course, the country had a lot of sheep and goats, and that was the main food item. And our education covered a lot of sheep and goat. And when I came to Auburn, of course, in the Southeast and even in the US, sheep and goat medicine, it was something very new. And I had a professor, Dr. Tom Poe, and the second day I was there, he called me and he said, Mobini, I have a case for you in the barn. Here's a sheep. That's your case. So from that point, I kind of got an interest in that species in the US. And with the opportunity that came on later on when I finished my master in residency, of course, Therio was big in Auburn. I trained, and at that time, cattle embryo transfer and artificial insemination, it was just beginning, especially embryo transfer. Then after I graduated, I went to faculty at Tuskegee and taught in med school there. And sheep and goat was a major interest of the entire university. And there was an opportunity. So I kind of took that opportunity in embryo transfer and reproduction, and I've done many first things there. Laparoscopic AI in artificial insemination in goats and embryo transfer. So it kind of led me more to be interested. And of course, the students, they were motivating. They wanted to do it. So I had a good group of students who were very enthusiastic and working with me on the projects. And I remember we did the first embryo transfer workshop and procedure at Tuskegee with the students. It was a great experience.
That's fascinating. I feel like large animal has a lot of advancements in technology. So, what have you kind of, other than embryo transfer and artificial insemination, those are two great examples. Are there other types of technology and things that you've kind of seen evolve over the years?
Well, the invent of ultrasound, I think it was big in large animal reproduction, and to some extent laparoscopic artificial insemination in sheep, a little bit in the goats because it's more difficult because they're not docile. They won't just lay down and let you do whatever you want with them. So they carry on and cry like a kid. So I think those two were some of the new areas, and then a lot of hormonal manipulation that came later on in reproduction, which has significant advancing effects in animal production.
This is very fascinating to me. I'm very naive in this area, so I almost don't even know what to ask. But for people that don't know very much about sheep and goats, I'm very curious about any stories that you have that kind of show the uniqueness of working with these species. Like you gave a great one about how goats are not very cooperative. What other stories do you have?
Oh, stories about the male goats or bucks. You gotta watch them. You don't turn your back on them. I remember, I always thought the students don't turn your back on. I mean, I was a faculty also, other faculty in the department. And one day we were in the barn and we were working on a big buck. and the buck got loose, and there was a faculty member on the other end of the barn. It was kind of bent down, and he was doing something else, and the buck went straight to him and then lifted him up and attacked him from the back. So that was the characteristic. One of the thing that was funny, but the good thing is he didn't get hurt. It was yeah, yeah. That's the story. It never leaves my mind when I work with the bucks. I always remember that.
Oh my goodness. The other thing is, and I don't know if it's still true today, but we definitely went through a period where there were a lot of backyard farms where people had goats. Like goats are all over social media. They think they're hilarious. And a lot of these animals, these backyard farms, are going to small animal veterinarians who really don't know what to do with these animals. Have you experienced that too? Like people that are getting a few goats that are in the backyard kind of
Oh yeah.
situation?
Oh yes. In the southeast, and around in 1994, 95, it just kind of took off. The goat production. You can't have sheep unless you have a hair sheep because of the wool, and summer is just intolerable for wool sheep. And a lot of small animal veterinarians needed a continuing education. And so I was quite involved with American Association of Small Ruminant Practitioners, which is an association, puts a lot of CE programs for even the small animal veterinarian. So I did quite a bit of that kind of activity in my career, and not only concentrating on reproduction, also in common diseases and procedures and parasite management, which is a major obstacle to small ruminant production in the southeast and throughout the U.S. So, yeah, quite a bit, and it's still a lot of workshops are put for that purpose because, as you said, the access to veterinarians in the rural area and limited resource farmer is not there, and that brings what I do now. When you get to certain age and go through certain procedure. I had a disc surgery, so I can't work with large animals, large animals, but I still can work with sheep and goat. And telemedicine, telehealth is a big need in the rural area. I do that, and I majority of my calls are sheep and goat producers that don't have access to veterinarians, and they want guidance.
Yeah. On that note, we need more veterinarians in these areas. How would you communicate the appreciation of what you do that might encourage someone who's going through vet school and they're trying to figure out what they might do? What are some things that you really love about working with sheep and goat that I encourage somebody to be more curious and open to exploring it?
Well, working with this species, it's much lighter when your body don't have the capacity to deal with larger animal. They're good species to work with. They're good producing animal. A lot of people have them as pets. A lot of people raise them as meat, milk, and wool. So the opportunity is there. The challenge is that you don't make money working on those species. So you go to school with a large debt, you're coming out of a school, and you can't afford to just do a small ruminant. So that's why a lot of a small animal veterinarians become a key to maybe fill that gap. And if they can, see, I tell people, take your sheep and goat to the clinic, because if you call a farm call, you can't afford it. At least you can get a veterinary service if you take them to the clinic. And in a lot of towns, the small animal clinics are where they can take them. And there's not that many large animal clinics left.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've done a lot in your career, and they're very different. I don't even know all the connections. How did you develop a veterinary technician program? How did you get involved there?
Oh, that's that's an interesting story. I left Tuskegee after 8 years, and I went into a practice. I thought that, well, I want to give a practice a try. I was working on the side. I was doing some relief work, and my area in the university teaching, I was in the teaching hospital. So it wasn't just didactic teaching, there was a lot of clinical work. And after 6 months, I thought I missed university. So I looked for places, and in Georgia, I found an opportunity working in a veterinary technician program, which was associated with the College of Agriculture. And that College of Agriculture had a main sheep and goat research center in the university system. So that led me to that program. And it was a 2-year program, and they wanted to make it an emphasis in large animals. So that also gave me an opportunity to introduce some courses in a 4-year BS program, because the 2-year program, you don't have a leeway what courses you want to teach. You have a very set program, limited number of years. But a 4-year program, you have the same didactic veterinary education, hands-on and knowledge skill, but then you could add more. So I developed that program into putting reproduction courses, introducing some research project courses, animal disease, herd health management, several courses like that, to make it large animal oriented, because university had a cattle farm, a few horses, and a lot of sheep and goats. So that would have been a good resource for students to use and practice while they go to school. So that's the way it got me there. But then after a couple of years, because of opportunities in the university, I kind of left the program and went to research and extension side of the university, and I became the extension veterinarian for the state of Georgia for small ruminant. Then I got involved into research with the small ruminant, especially in reproduction and disease and herd health management and parasite control. So I did that for a number of years, and then there was a need in the program. They needed help, so they came to me and they pulled me back into the program as a program director and department head. Because it was a 4-year program, our scope was not just veterinary technology. The 2-year program in university just went away, and we concentrated on a 4-year program. And we had an opportunity to get funding to build a large animal surgery facility and a small animal facility and expand it. So I had an opportunity to make those functional. And then it led me to get into the nitty gritty of changing the curriculum and, in my mind, improving the curriculum. And that's where I got into. And then I had an opportunity with several other schools that wanted to open a 4-year program and work with them. And then after 5 years, I left that and went into associate dean for academics, or assistant associate. The title didn't matter. I was in charge of academics of the College of Agriculture, which veterinary technology was part of that program with animal science and other majors. And I still have an oversight over the program. I kept it. So that was how I got into veterinary technology education.
When you were building a curriculum, like, what's important to think about when it comes to education in general? Because you've done a lot of teaching, but like, what are some key things that maybe you think people don't understand or might miss that they're so important when it comes to veterinary education?
Well, you got to train the students as you teach on critical thinking, good analytical skills, and build them a whole around person versus just teaching them the subject matter. And I think that goes also to the curriculum you build. You should be around critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills. 3 major aspects of any education majors. So I was trying to concentrate on that while building the curriculum. And we do a good job in veterinary schools, teaching them the core curriculum. But I think business management, if you're talking about veterinary school, that's a big part of it, in addition to critical thinking and problem solving and communication skills. So as it relates to veterinary technician education, unfortunately, the timing of this program doesn't allow you in a 2-year program to do really that, in addition to skills and knowledge base and hands-on skills that you have to teach. And so that's the challenge. And then we try to build up advancement. I think that becomes more of a challenge. How do you advance in an education system?
Advance on the education side or the students?
Advance after you graduated, as a vet
Oh,
technician, to advance.
so career pathing.
Career pathing, right. What you can do as a 2-year veterinary technician versus a 4-year veterinary technician, and how we can set the curriculum that allows that advancement. You build that advancement some sort of way in it. That's the challenge I think we're facing. We are measuring the 2-year veterinary technician graduates with the same exam as a 4-year veterinary technician graduates. It's not only the exam, it's what we are teaching them is the same, and we measure them the same when they're creating the program. I think that is an area it needs to be looked at when we want a veterinary technician to have a career ladder and utilize them better in our veterinary team environment.
Completely agree. And this whole podcast is basically career pathing, right? Like understanding what is possible in veterinary medicine. So I know you said that this is kind of the challenging part, but I also know that someone recommended you for this podcast because you helped them in their career pathing. So what have you seen? Like, do you have examples of people that you have seen do really well in either laddering or pathing of some sort?
In the whole education scheme, if you get a 2-year program, your advancement is limited unless that's the challenge that I bring to the table for veterinary technician educators. Create 4-year programs who can use the 2-year that they already have, because they have the skills and hands-on skill and knowledge as it relates to veterinary medicine. What they're lacking is a core curriculum as it relates to communication courses, critical analytic courses, math courses. So build some sort of program that they can improve, not by going to brick and mortar schools, but maybe something online. That's the area I think we need to look at, because we can utilize the veterinary technicians a whole lot more if we could elevate them and build that into the practice. And the other part of it is we need to have veterinary technician students and veterinary students in school to work together. Got to build that working relationship through the veterinary school education. And so there'll be an appreciation what the veterinary technicians go through and can do, so they can be more utilized in practice.
I have heard someone talk about programs where the veterinary students do clinics with the veterinary technician students. And I've only heard good things, and it makes total sense because then you're learning those skill sets of communication, teamwork, and where everybody can be best utilized. So have you also seen that work, like an example of where that worked really well?
Yes. The challenge is that the veterinary schools have to create veterinary technician programs or work very closely veterinary technician programs to make that happen. We have, I would say, majority of the schools who do that, they have a veterinary technician program in their school. And I know several of them that they carry that model. But I think we need to be thinking about how other veterinary schools can get involved and creatively create that environment if they don't have the program in the veterinary school.
That may be a lot of work, and change is hard to implement, from my understanding, in academia. What do you think would be the biggest needle mover to go to more of those models?
I think AVMA has started some sort of collaborative work with veterinary technician educators, NAFTA, and licensing boards like AABSB. And I think within that context, you have to get involved at AVMC and just try to see what pathway we can create that gives us two things. One is that currently we don't have enough veterinary technician graduates. We talk about realization, we talk about enhancement and upward movement, but if we don't have enough, majority of the states, you have 3 veterinarians or 4 veterinarians for 1 veterinary technician. If we can't supply the number needed, it's hard to achieve what we're trying to do as far as utilization and recognition. So the traditional way we're going is not going to give you that number. Studies have shown that. So it needs to be a group team effort to look at that seriously. And AVTE, of course, is, in my mind, a place to get it started. And there's some work being done, but as you said, it takes a while.
On that note, you brought up your work with AVMA. One, how did you get involved with AVMA, and what was your role with veterinary technicians, because they don't always have a lot of advocates in some of these areas to help with these changes and having a voice, which is a wonderful opportunity that you're there and you can do that.
Well, during my life at the university, I've done a lot of service-oriented work. And so I wanted to give back to the profession and do that with veterinary medicine. I volunteered in Atlanta Olympic Games. That was an amazing experience. The university system came because it was done in Atlanta and they needed volunteers with languages. So I speak Farsi. So I volunteered and I was the interpreter for Farsi speaking countries that were in the Olympics. So I found an avenue through, and that's my advice. A lot of people I talk to, they want to get involved. I tell them, get involved in the smaller, your local associations. And I found an opportunity to get involved with American Association of Small Ruminant Practitioners. It was a small group that is started. And through that association, and as you know, that at the AVMA, we have these committees and councils, which allied organizations have representative on those. So I served on animal welfare committee and I served on legislative advisory committee. And that opened the door for me. And then the state association had openings, and actually they came to me, said, we would like for you to work with us from your district. And so I got involved with the Georgia Veterinary Medical Association and learned a lot through the process. And then at the same time, there was opening in the Small Ruminant Practitioners Board. So I served on their board. I ran for the position and served on their board. So it kind of opened the horizon for me and learned a lot as far as giving back and volunteering. And after I finished my term on the Georgia board, there was an opening in the AVMA House of Delegates from Georgia, because each states have a delegate and alternate delegate. And I became alternate delegate first, and then I served as a delegate. And there was an opening in Committee for Veterinary Technician Education and Activities, CVTA, while I was in the House of Delegates. So I applied for that, and I served on CVTA for 2 years. And I was encouraged to apply for a board position after my term ended at House of Delegates. So I did apply for that, and that's the way I got on the AVMA board. But then I had to give up the CVTEA because you can't be on the AVMA board and be on a committee. So, but I learned also a lot during 2 years. I was CVTEA to give me leverage to bring the technicians issue to the board. And the board has really took that project to heart as far as how can we utilize technicians, promote them, elevate them, and give them their value in the practice team and utilize them. And then with the VPA that came out, we concentrated more on utilization of technicians, and the whole technician utilization came to the surface. So why we're not utilizing this group of educated, trained professionals and trying to create something different that basically does what technicians can do.
That echoes what I have heard is this yes. And with the focus back on veterinary technicians and utilization, which is great to hear that they're focused on it. What have you seen are the actions or next steps? Like what physically have they done to push that value and mission forward?
When you say they, you refer to
AVMA or the committee or powers that be?
Yeah, there is a task force created that is looking at the next steps, and I think there's quite a bit of progress, and it's ongoing. On the work of a task force, not to being specific, surveys was done so we can understand what needs of when their technicians are, and then, as I said before, a group was also created between AVMA, AVTE, and AVMC, AVSB, which is the licensing part, to just kind of see how that work can continue. But again, it's very challenging. And I think AVTA, the technician education, has to take that lead and make some strides. Because here we have 2-year degree, 4-year degree, VTS. And so how we can strengthen and make it a ladder for elevation within those groups and their utilization, I think the education team can do a whole lot to take the lead on that.
On that note, for veterinary technicians that might be listening to this and they're wanting to know what's ahead, what's possible for them, because the other thing, of course, that we see is the longevity of people in these positions. We want to increase the longevity. That's part of the whole process too, right? What would you say to veterinary technicians?
I would say just hang in there. The work is being done. It may be slow, but everyone recognizes their value, what they bring to the team. They need to be given more responsibilities in the practice on a uniform basis, and they need to be compensated accordingly. And that's the challenge the profession is facing. And I think profession is trying to address it, but it's not an easy task to take up.
I think that's fair. You seem to be in places where the work is meaningful. It takes time. And I think this is good too, that because maybe not everyone gets to see what's happening inside of AVMA. And so to know that there are people who care, that believe they're valuable, and they believe that there is need for change, hopefully is encouraging. So I think that is a good start.
Yes, definitely. And believe me, 6 years I've been on the board. I saw progress, but not to the speed that maybe veterinary technician like to see. But the board was working hard. The entire AVMA team is working hard to make that a reality.
I think the other opportunity too for the entire team to do their part in supporting veterinary technicians. And you have seen a lot of different leaders, and you have been a leader in many different areas. What do you think is the most successful thing for someone to be a good leader? Like, what is your definition of a good leader?
I think you need to be a good listener first. And then you need to have the courage to go outside your comfort zone and speak if you're really passionate about an issue. And you need to be a good collaborator and supporter as well.
Those are all really good. I, for some, getting outside of your comfort zone, we work in a profession where everyone is very, very smart, and it can be hard to speak up sometimes. Was there a time when you had to speak up about a topic that might not have been the everybody agreed on it?
Oh, definitely. When you're around it, it's always you bring issues out, and there's going to be pros and cons. There are supporters, there are naysayers, and at the end of the day, you have to look into a compromise to move things forward. Sometimes you have to take your position back to support somebody else. It's just give and take, like anything in politics. So, in a board, as I said, not everybody is in support, but at the end of the day, the board works together for betterment of the profession, and that should be in your mind as you are around the table.
I think all of those characteristics also can go into mentorship, which mentors leaders. Who has been the biggest mentor for you?
Mm.
I know you mentioned Auburn, but any others throughout your career that you particularly remember?
Well, when I was young, within your family, you have your parents, of course. My father wanted me to get a good education. I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, but took advantage of the opportunities. I had a mentor when I was in the fifth or sixth grade, and that was a person on a Peace Corps mission that came to Iran. His name was Peter Melonas, and the Peace Corps group then would have English classes and then activities for youth. And that's where I learned my English and I got involved. And when he left, he kept communicating with me. He write me letter encouraging me. And he saw something in me. And then when he left, I came to the U.S. and I found him in the U.S. through Peace Corps. But I went and visited him. And so that mentorship stays with me. And of course, I had a uncle that he really supported me. And he was a big mentor. And Auburn, as I said, every step I had a mentor. In the veterinary college, I had a professor. He was encouraging me and saw something in me and then encouraged me to go and get higher education than DVM. And my mission was to go back and teach at the university in Iran, but the events after the hostage crisis and life has kind of changed things. And we stayed and got involved in veterinary medicine in the US. And now, hopefully, with the World Veterinary Association, I can get back and use my knowledge to help others. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I know that you have helped veterinary professionals come over to the United States. Is that with that organization that you've been able to do that?
And not through the organization. The World Veterinary
Well,
Association is the combination of different world veterinary organization groups looking at the profession. And so, of course, there's opportunities for sharing of knowledge when you work with different group from different part of the world. But I've done some mission works also in developing countries, I've done volunteer work in Bangladesh. I have done work in Jordan. I've done work in Afghanistan. I had opportunity to write a book on diseases that could be diagnosed through a simple manual with pictures and simple know-how how to deal with them in Afghanistan as part of the reconstruction efforts of the U.S. after Afghanistan war. So, and I learned a lot from other countries. You know, we have the most advanced veterinary education in the world, but there are things we can learn from others. A lot of things. And one of the things I learned was working with a group in South Africa. They had developed, we talked about sheep and goat. One of the biggest constraints to sheep and goat production is parasite resistant to medications and parasite controls. So they developed a simple card we call a FAMACHA in South Africa that they took the color of the nucleus member of the eye as a measure of anemia and correlated it to parasite burden, which is a blood-sucking parasite in sheep and goat. So basically, instead of doing fecal work or doing a axial volume, you can just open the eye and compare it to the different colors on the card and determine if you're dealing with it anemic and what is the degree of anemia. We had an opportunity to validate that card with a group of scientists from several universities, and I was part of that research team that validated it, and it's widely used in the U.S. And I developed a curriculum to teach our extension agents and producers how to use the system in the herd. So learned a lot working overseas. The profession is so wide reach all over the world that I think we have a responsibility to teach less fortunate countries if we're talking about food security throughout the world.
Because it impacts everybody. It impacts us all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I remember learning that in vet schools, the FAMACHA. I remember that. So that's really fascinating. And things don't have to be complicated for them to work, right?
Right.
Like,
And
often simple is better.
And we have to have an open mind and try.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we are, as a veterinarians, we always experience, we always look for different ways, we always do things outside the box. So being involved through international program, helping the disadvantaged and learning from what it works for them is a noble idea.
Absolutely. Well, our time has flown by, so I have a couple last questions for you. And one of them is the one community concept from AVTE. It's built on the idea that none of us succeed alone, and we've talked a lot about that today. What's one moment that reminded you that no one succeeds alone?
I would use my own example in life. If I didn't have group of people to support me and mentor me, I wouldn't have been here today. And I use that concept of be supporting and offering help to my potential students. I've taught in vet school. I mean, when you're teaching in vet school, you have the brightest of the brightest. The way the system works here, admission process works. I really had students that I was associated with that went and become successful veterinarian and researchers. So I always learn that encourages me, the influence they have in my life, and I always keep contact with them and try to learn from them. In the veterinary technician education, it's a different. You have the students who have an interest and love to become a profession to work with animals. And you have to create an environment and nurture them more. And I learned that in teaching a veterinary technology program. I had students that they wanted to drop out, and I just kind of helped them to hang in there and guided them, because you're dealing with students who are going to graduate school to become a veterinarian versus somebody out of high school who wants to go to veterinary technician program. And I have had several examples that they are superstars now in what they do. And that association and their coming back, it kind of is a gratitude to me that shows me how you have to have a village to raise a professional.
I love that. And then my last question is, it does not have to be stuck to your career or the profession, but when I mentioned gratitude, what is something you're very grateful for right now?
I'm grateful for the opportunity that I received in immigrating to US. I'm grateful for my family who supported me. When I came to the US, I was me and my wife, and we went through a lot of hardship, and my wife stuck with me, encouraged me, and I did the same for her. We both got an education, got a job, and made it here with the support of our family and friends from home. So I'm always grateful to them. So having mentors, having supporters gave me a lot of gratitude in life, and I'm trying to be helpful. I follow a Persian ideology. It's a ancient Persian ideology of living through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And I try to follow that in life.
Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. It sounds simple, but when you hear what his philosophy has produced, an international career spanning a generation of students who almost gave up and didn't, 6 years on the AVMA board advocating for a profession that doesn't always have a seat at the table, and a village he has quietly built his entire life. It sounds like a philosophy worth striving for. Dr. Mobini was nominated to share his story here with us today because he has impacted the career path of many others. This episode is the first in our new One Community series created in partnership with AVTE. Every guest in the series will embody the building blocks of One Community: leadership, innovation, and mentorship. If today's conversation resonated with you, stay tuned. There is so much more to come. If you want to learn more about AVTE and the One Community initiative, the link is in the show notes. And for key takeaways, reflection questions from today's conversation, head over to the Sprinkle of Wisdom Substack for the podcast club guide. I'll, of course, link everything below. Please subscribe and share this episode with someone in veterinary medicine who you think would appreciate it. And until next time, keep reimagining what's possible in veterinary life.